Hello, we are the seventh grade middle school team, and we wanted to share with you some of the things we learned from our article today. We read two articles. We looked at successful inclusive practices in middle school and secondary schools and creating an anti-bias learning environment. These are the two things. So we wanted to share with you some of the takeaways that we had. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Aubrey, and she's going to start off by talking about successful inclusive practices in the middle and secondary schools.
All right. So the first one is differentiated instruction. Differentiated instruction recognizes that each student has their own specific learning profile and their specific learning characteristic, and it aims at practices that reach all students of all different backgrounds and all different learning styles. It goes along with the universal design for learning, which creates the differentiated learning experiences. It makes school environments usable for students from all different backgrounds and learning styles, and it focuses on three distinct curriculum access points: content, what is taught and what we want students to know; process, how students demonstrate what is learned; and the product, how to augment standardized assessments with authentic assessment approaches. Oh, do you want? All three. Sorry.
Or just, do the first 2 and then I can talk if you want.
And then the second one is interdisciplinary curriculum. So before, students with disabilities often were met with failure because content subjects were often unrelated and out of context. So interdisciplinary curriculum aims at kind of bridging the gap between all of the contents and helping to show how different subjects influence students' lives, kind of relating specifically to students' lives. It integrates one or more disciplines to examine a central theme, a problem, issue, topic, or a question, and is an alternative to department kind of style where different subjects are very separated and not kind of cohesive. And yeah.
All right. And our article also talked about technology as an inclusive practice, and it can be a really powerful tool. As our job as a teacher is to really talk about and teach them healthy and safe use of technology, and also how using it appropriately as a tool, like ethical and legal use, and showing them the many different ways and methods that we can use technology as a appropriate tool in our classroom.
For number 4, it was student collaboration, peer mediated instruction. And the big point that came from this was that teachers have to model to students how to appropriately collaborate because a lot of them don't have those skills. Peer mediated instruction includes teaching arrangements in which students are the instructional agents for not only themselves but also for other students. And this does promote student engagement, student accountability, responsibility, which ultimately really does help students see where their personal strengths are, but also areas of needs that they need to work on. There are two types: cooperative group learning, and evidence has supported that this is beneficial for students in the areas where they need to work, in the areas where they do succeed or excel. But there is criteria that teachers should follow to make sure that cooperative learning is actually efficient, because sometimes students can work in groups and it's not necessarily efficient. And for partner learning, this can occur across same age groups, across classrooms, across teams, and even across schools and subjects. And not only is it that the tutor receives these benefits, but it's also for the students that they are tutoring. So this does promote interpersonal skills, personal relationships, engagement in lessons, once again creating positive self-esteem and ultimately skill development.
All right. Well, our article spoke a lot about using universal design for learning as a tool. And by doing that, you're already building in supports for most students, or even all sometimes. But there may be times where you have to make accommodation. So number 5 is supportive accommodation for our curricular inclusion. And there are many different levels to this. When thinking about our English language learners, or sometimes if we have lower reading levels in the group, you could take say you're doing a reading in class, and maybe for our English learners, you break it down into smaller chunks. Or for our students reading at a lower level, they get a different reading entirely. So this would fall under the assistance and supports for students as far as adaptions. You could also assign a peer mentor within the class and someone who can be peer support. Allow for multi-level outcomes. So maybe a group is completing an assignment together, but different members within the group all have a different goal in mind. So like for my English language learner, it might be a communication goal or just having that group interaction. And then this can also goes along with showing different levels of mastery. Maybe there's different products to show mastery of skills. And then finally, looking at content goals from outside of, or looking at goals from outside the content, like having our life skills students have more life school goals or communication within a group or project. Number 6 was teaching responsibility, peacemaking, and self-determination. These are really important skills to learn, especially when you're dealing with the challenging student, the kid that, after all the things that you've already done, is still struggling. The article mentions that teaching responsibility is very important and usually is best done through a trusted adult, because that's where they're going to start learning responsibility from, someone who has clear, this is right, this is wrong, someone who sets limits for the child. And it also, you have a better chance of teaching responsibility in a school where the rules are very clear and fair. Peacemaking, this puts that back on the student. Having given students responsibility through peer mediation. And then self-determination, really having the student take some ownership in their choice making. For example, having them lead their own IEP meeting, giving them some goal setting tools and tools for self-advocacy. And then finally, this article, at least when we're talking about the middle school, looked at number 7, authentic assessment of student performance. It's saying to kind of get away from recall assessments, which may be, using that multiplication test is the only way that we're seeing if they're learning. Give them times to perform, produce, or demonstrate their skills in a real life setting. And they gave the example of a writing portfolio, because you're not just looking at that final writing piece, you're looking at the process, their edits made, and their growth over time. So as their authentic assessment. And I'm going to pass you off to Cassandra. She's going to introduce our second article.
So Article 2 was creating an anti-bias learning environment, and there were 11 steps to this process. So the first one was self-exploration. Second was comprehensive integration. Third, time and maturation. 4, accepting environment. 5, intervention. 6, lifelong learning. 7, discovering learning. 8, life experiences. 9, resources review. 10, homeschool community connection. And 11, examine the classroom environment. I'm going to pass you off to Daniel Murphy.
Okay, so in order to be creating this environment, conversations about understanding and respect should not be limited to a commemorative event like 9/11 or a holiday. We need to make sure we're fostering these ideals as an ongoing effort. As possible, we need to breach the difficult topics of hate, bias, scapegoating, and exclusion in our classrooms. And it would be helpful for educators to have a self-assessment checklist with the 11 steps Cassandra listed to measure the inclusion of these practices in our rooms.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.